Whitney.
Hi.
Hi, babe.
Hey, here I am.
Here you are. So for those of you who don't know, Whitney and I have been in an open relationship for 5 years. And I think we can call it an open relationship, although I don't think we knew what the hell we were doing for the most part in what we were doing. But certainly coming up with the rules that made sense and the ways that we could come up with agreements and talking to the people that were available. But man, we really learned a lot over the years. And I think a lot of people think that because we've tried this and we share our lessons and we share what we know, that we're open relationship advocates. You know, like we're just trying to push this agenda on everybody. But if anything, I think through the time we've realized how challenging it is. And really the main reason to be in an open relationship is not for the relationship itself necessarily. It's so that you get to learn about yourself and get to be the best possible version of yourself. So if anything, we're not open relationship advocates. We're just learning about yourself advocates.
I think we're just like love advocates. Like, yeah, I'm not pushing an open relationship on anyone, nor do I don't want you to be in an open relationship. I only want you to be in an open relationship if you truly want to be in one. You know, like relationships are difficult enough already, and it's just having to live with somebody and deal with all of that and bringing two individuals together make it challenging on its own. And so when you add in monogamous or non-monogamous, doesn't matter, just whatever you want to do for yourself personally. Yeah. I just want you to love each other, period, whether that's open, poly, monogamous, white picket fence, whatever it is.
Yeah. I think it goes a lot for, you know, because I talk about ayahuasca a lot, people say that I'm an ayahuasca advocate. Well, yeah, in the right circumstance, for the right people, under the right situation, I do recognize the benefits and like what it can teach you and what it can provide and what it can open up. And I think the same is for open relationship, but it's certainly not a panacea and it's certainly not for everybody. It's a way to learn. And sometimes, as with ayahuasca, a very painful way to learn. And that's sometimes how we learn is by putting ourselves face first in the midst of our shit, either in our own brain or actually somatically expressing and feeling that. And then we get to learn a few things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also, you know, being in an open relationship for me personally, something that I say to a lot of people is the fact that it's made me a better human. Just because I know myself so much better now. I know my insecurities and I know where my jealousy comes from. And I know that I have self-worth shit. And I know I have fear of abandonment. And I know I have all of these things to where I honestly can say that I don't think a lot of these lessons would have come up without being in an open relationship.
And I for fucking sure know that my shit wouldn't have come up because I did all of the other things. And I'm still learning, like every single day, I'm still learning things that are not trivial. Things that if I went to a plant medicine ceremony, I would come back from and my eyes would be all lit up and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe how much I learned from this ayahuasca trip, right? Things that are that big, I'm still continually learning. And I tried every other way, but this way is a way to teach me deep, deep lessons about myself that I absolutely wouldn't have gotten another way. And I think hopefully through this conversation, we'll be able to talk about some of these things that we learned, not only about ourselves, but learned about love and learned about the relationship. But I think a good place to start is for you to paint a picture of, you know, because you said you've become a better person through this, like paint a picture for the world of Whitney prior to open relationship.
I became a better lover, friend, girlfriend, person, human, daughter, like everything from being in an open relationship. And I can say that with guarantee. Because first off, I'm sorry to all of my ex-boyfriends. Not sure I've apologized to you guys in a long time, so I apologize for being a psychopath. I was just so incredibly jealous. I was so jealous. And I was going through people's phones and like, I remember being into a huge fight with one of my boyfriends over something. And I remember I went into his bed and I was peeking around and I was looking for any like hair follicles that were on the bed. And I found one, was World War II. for me and him. I'll tell you that much.
Remember when we first started dating and you found some shampoo and conditioner in my shower?
Yes.
And I was like, that's yours. That you brought that. And you're like, no, I didn't. Nope, I didn't. Who's been over in your shower? I was like,
Exactly.
no, for real, that's yours.
You had somebody showering.
And then like 10 minutes later, you're like, oh yeah, that is mine.
I was just really like, yeah, I would paint these incredibly wild escapades of what had to have been happening, of course, because I wasn't there, you know? And I really think if I can go from being that jealous and just that, I don't even know what you want to call it, but just, I think I was really just closed off. Like I didn't know why I was jealous. I didn't know what was going on. And then also, let me mind you, I was crazy about what they were potentially doing. And I was, on the other hand, actually doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the one that was texting the other guys and changing names in my phone and pretending like I was going to meet up with girlfriends and doing all of that. And I also think there's a lot of shame surrounding that for women in general, being and saying that, yeah, I cheated on people. But it's something that is very, very common in today. And so I really think by being in an open relationship and having these tough conversations and diving into my insecurities and seeing where my jealousy comes from and having to be completely 100% open and honest with another individual has made me a better person, because I do that now in all of my relationships. And I am so beyond grateful for that.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you know, looking back, like I think back to my former relationship with Caitlin, and I was thought of as like progressive and non-jealous because I would let her wear whatever she wanted and dance around. But, you know, God forbid someone would see her without her top on, or she would flirt with somebody. And then it was time where, you know, Aubrey, the fighter and, you know, warrior, protector, you know, all of these ideas about what it meant to be a man and what it meant to fight for your girl, and all of this stuff would come up. But still, for a lot of people in a lot of relationships, just allowing her to go out and be herself and just be like, yeah, go kill it. Go, you know, dance on that bar top and fucking have a blast. People are like, wow, that's amazing. And then, you know, for the time that was pushing the boundaries. But now looking back, I was like, oh my goodness, like I wasn't even close to the level of openness and respect and allowance of freedom that I've achieved through this. I mean, you know, you look back to the early days of our relationship, in the times that I've even got jealous with us, you know, like when you were cooking spaghetti for somebody and you didn't tell me who it was. And I assumed.
Y'all, this is the funniest shit ever.
I assumed.
I've actually, no. I'll handle this story. First off, we were on a break. Okay. I could be cooking spaghetti for anybody I wanted to cook spaghetti for. I don't understand. I don't even know how we got on this thing. I think maybe
I taught you the recipe. That's why I taught it to you.
No.
My special secret is infused with my love. That's why.
Get on out of here. So maybe I was trying to get a recipe, or you texted me and were like, hey, what are you up to tonight? And I said, I'm cooking spaghetti.
My love infused red pasta spaghetti.
Yeah. And he came up with this whole wild story about how I was having somebody over to cook him spaghetti, and then he became Spaghetti Man.
Spaghetti Man.
Who the fuck was Spaghetti Man?
Because we were on a break, so I didn't have a right to ask you who it was. So I would just walk around, just burning the soles of my feet, just pondering Spaghetti Man who's devouring my love face first.
Even better was that there was no Spaghetti Man. I found out about it at first, and I kind of just let him believe it for a little bit, because I was like, this is so absurd. I was making spaghetti for my girlfriends, and he created this whole Spaghetti Man story.
But that was even closer, because we took a break, and that was in the break between when we went from monogamous to open. But even when we were in the monogamous relationship, I remember another instance where you made some kind of guttural, visceral comment or like grunt when Channing Tatum like took his shirt off or something on TV.
Yeah, and so does every other female in the history of all women.
Understood. Understood. And I was like so offended that you were that attracted and expressed that in front of me. How dare you express that you were attracted to a naked, gyrating Channing Tatum? So I went up and just started playing pool by myself. And like you and your girlfriend had come up like, hey, everything okay? I was like, yeah, fucking fine. Except Whitney just wants to be with Channing Tatum. I guess I'm not good enough. Guess I better blah, blah, blah. And like that's like the old us. right? And I don't know. And that was me after 20 ayahuasca ceremonies and tons of plant medicine and all of these things. Like nothing really cracked that. Nothing cracked that possessiveness, that need for validation, that ego, and this is the tool that's ultimately started to help. And I'm not claiming like, oh yeah, I've got it all figured out. I got it all done. Like I'm learning stuff every day still, but the power of this to get to the root of some of these core issues that are limiting your own happiness and limiting your own freedom of expression in love and life is pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also worth mentioning because one of the questions that we get a lot is, are you going to be open for the rest of your life? I don't know, y'all. I don't know. I mean, are you going to be monogamous for the rest of your life? Can you say that for 100% certainty? Maybe you can if you've put in the work and you are consciously deciding to be in a monogamous relationship, realizing, to use Tammy Nelson's words, who's a relationship expert she wrote the book, The New Monogamy, and she says, you have to see redefining monogamy as a challenging practice like yoga. Like constantly practicing yoga over and over and over again is like being in a monogamous relationship. So if you're entering into a relationship like that, then hell yeah, go for it. But now it's like, so if I look down the future and let's say we do decide to close the relationship or we split and we're both in monogamous relationships, whatever it is, it would be because I'm deciding to go into that challenging practice of a monogamous relationship.
Yeah, one of the best ways I've heard it described from people in, conscious people in that relationship is they call that relationship sadhana, their spiritual practice, right? And you can use monogamy as a way to learn. And that's why we're not saying like open is the only way to learn. It is a way to learn. Ayahuasca is not the only way to learn. Meditation and floating and yoga and ecstatic dance, these are all ways to learn. There's different ways in different situations that'll bring out either the fastest growth or the deepest growth or the most challenge. And there's nothing to say that we won't take the lessons from open, like the classic hero's journey where we leave ordinary life and go to the inmost cave and fight the dragons and get the gold of the lessons and the value, and then decide to return home with the elixir of all this knowledge and go back to monogamy. Who knows? Like we're still in the middle of the journey, fighting dragons and learning about our fears and trying to become the type of people that we know we want to become so that we actually can exist and carry a love that's uncommon and unusual and extraordinary, not just for each other, but for the world. Mm-hmm. That's it. But I think the first thing it starts with is rewiring like the false premises that are in the brain. And I know you're reading a great book now by Wednesday Martin called Untrue.
I highly, highly, highly recommend that for anybody really interested in like female sexuality. And I think it's also beneficial for men as well to read that for a deeper understanding of women.
Yeah. And this book just came out, but in our time, the thing that flipped my mind was reading Chris Ryan's Sex at Dawn, because it painted a picture of female sexuality that was not like what I wanted to believe and what society wanted you to believe, which was like this pride of lions idea where the dominant lion fights all the other lions and gets to keep his herd and nobody else gets to, interact with that. And like, that's not human life. Actually, we lived in tribal societies and we had a whole different structure around that. And female sexual urges, while distinct in some ways, generally, if you want to call the patterns, are no less than male sexual urges. They're just a bit different. So you start reading books like Sex at Dawn and Red Queen, and I started rewiring this very, kind of alpha gorilla concept and recognizing, oh yeah, shit, we're more like bonobos. And that opened up the possibility. Now, I didn't realize how much work I had to do in the process, but it philosophically made sense. And I think for you, that was the moment when I first started expressing it, and that it was like, you weren't quite ready, even though it philosophically kind of made sense because we'd both read Sex at Dawn, but you weren't quite ready yet to take the leap.
No. I was definitely not quite ready yet. We broke up and I was like, peace, I can't. This is not going to work. But but what was interesting about it and why I continued the conversation and why we had the conversation was because through reading Sex at Dawn, it made me feel like I wasn't alone, that yes, monogamy is challenging for women as well. It's not any less hard for women, you know? So I felt like, man, something's wrong with me that I can't do this. I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to have any sexual desire for the person laying next to me anymore, but I want to fuck everything else, you know? And so that was like really challenging for me. I just felt like I was never going to find anybody and there was something wrong. So when we read Sex at Dawn and they were saying, no, women's sexual desire is basically just as high as male desire. There's not a whole lot of difference there, which is also something they talk about in this book, Untrue. It gave me a little bit of hope and it made me think of it on like the intellectual, philosophical level. So, but then when Aubrey did bring it up to me, I was not interested. I was still that kind of like alpha, you don't look at anybody else, you don't talk to anybody else, who are you texting type of person still. Slightly, I was still holding on to that, you know?
Yeah.
And so then we split for 3 months and I went backpacking for 3 months by myself. And I was in Thailand and I met this guy and I was really interested in him, but I also really loved you. I really loved Aubrey. Like my heart was with you, but I was still interested in this other guy. And so that showed me, oh wait, I can still be in love with him and be in and want to be in a relationship with him and still be attracted to somebody else and have some fun. You know, like they weren't binary. They weren't one and the same.
Yeah, they weren't mutually exclusive.
Right. I could have both. My love cup didn't empty because I was interested in somebody else. I still wanted to be with you.
Yeah, I think actually feeling that, you know, it's one thing to like philosophically understand it, and then it's another thing to feel it. Like it's one thing to philosophically know, okay, yeah, women's sexual desire is, you know, it's the same as mine, and which is and should be attracted to other people, and you know, be able to experience that, and then you actually doing it is a much different thing. And I think you have to have these little practical lessons where you get to have that experience, like, oh, well, actually, I do dig this guy and still love Aubrey, and it hasn't diminished that. So maybe all of this theory about love not being in scarcity and, you know, pleasure with one person not taking away pleasure from another person, these things that we kind of philosophically understood, well, then you actually start to get a little justification for that personally, and you start to really understand and be able to play with it. And then that opens up, you know, the opportunity a little bit more. But on the other side of that too is opening up the pain that comes from having to make that switch. Because when we engaged into open, at that point I was already seeing somebody. And, you know, she was part of the agreement that we got into was I was going to keep seeing her. And that was, she's right here in the room.
She's in the room.
She's in the room,
I don't know if you guys
everyone.
can see. I'm like,
wow, you can hear her chuckling.
ah.
So that was, and she's in the room because she's one of our absolute best friends and closest people. We'll get to that more later. But that all of these paradigms that you used to have, like, okay, if you're interested in somebody, that's your enemy, all of this shit, it's all bullshit. But for a long time, it created this situation where, you know, I had her and you didn't have anybody yet. And that was really hard because the brunt of the work at that point was on you. And for me, having never experienced the other side, my sympathy reservoir was like, you know, someone with a really small bladder who has to wake up and go to in a movie theater, pee 7 times. Like that was my sympathy reservoir. Like it wasn't big, you know. So, and I would get frustrated with you, not having any fucking idea how hard it actually was.
Yeah.
You know, through that time. So like, talk about those early days. Talk about opening up and having to be, because we have friends that are in a similar spot, like be in a position where one lover gets to go first.
Which I think is actually pretty common. You know, I think it's going to be for people who are interested in this type of relationship, it's going to be challenging to find a fully balanced relationship where you and your primary both have other lovers at the very same time who are interested in coming into this container. So somebody's going to have to start first. And
I think that's probably where like this idea and interest in this kind of swap scenario, which has never been a scenario that we've ever been interested in or involved. We're in what you would call polyamory, where we're interested in expressing love to other people individually, but like the idea, like, okay, even Stevens, like you got him, I got her, ready, like
go.
same time, like a terrorist exchange, like same time, let's go. All right. And then it feels like even, and then everybody can be like, we make it through, we all right, everybody good here.
Right.
Like that seems easier than this, because this is going to innately come in periods of balance and imbalance.
Right. And it's like, I would be home by myself when he was out with another woman. So then you're just sitting there with your fucking thoughts, and those are going crazy because I didn't have any of the tools or really knew what I was doing anyway. So I didn't want to do that anymore. So I went out and just got hammered with my girlfriends every single time he would go hang out with someone. And sure, there was some definite fun times, but it was it was not, I wasn't healing or really looking at the insecurities that I was bringing up. And what were those? It was self-worth. Why am I not good enough for you? Why do you want to see somebody else? Aren't I everything? Like, how can you leave me here by myself and want to be with somebody else? I'm right here. Like, I have nothing going on tonight.
Yeah.
We could be hanging out, but you're choosing not to. So I'm obviously not good enough for you, is where that comes. And then I have the fear of abandonment. Maybe he's going to like her more and he's going to leave me. And what happens then? So you're dealing with all of these crazy insecurities. So if I constantly went out to get hammered with my girlfriends, I would have never been able to fully bring those to light.
Well, they were going to come up one way or another on the hungover day. They're going to be
that was
okay,
the thing.
You put them on hold and now I'm back, bitch. We're coming with a fury.
So that's the thing. I truly believe that in some circumstances that alcohol can be medicine. And there was times where alcohol was medicine for me. But there's also times where it becomes poison, where the hangover the next day, where you're tired, you can't grasp on to the most conscious and loving thoughts because your mind is just not there. You feel like crap. Mm-hmm. So I then realized that the more I took care of myself, maybe I'm going to go do yoga. Maybe I'm going to, have some greens juice. I'm going to watch a movie. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to do things to expand my heart and my consciousness so I know how to better handle this situation, because I don't want to be like suffering through this. And for me, the reason I got into it was because I didn't have the answer. I didn't have the answer if I wanted to be monogamous or not monogamous.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and figure that out. So this was an experiment for me.
And another thing that we relied on heavily is, we didn't have any friends or anybody we knew, like personally, like on a social level, who were going through this. But Dr. Dan had some experience in kind of some poly cultures and
Thank God.
And he's a psychiatrist by trade, and
he's a wizard. Let's be real.
And had dabbled in this himself. So he was like our absolute lifeline. Like he talked us off so many ledges, like that guy was like the ultimate. He's the guy, like when someone's on the side of a building about ready to jump, like he's the guy in the fire department that you got to call and be like, hey man,
yes,
like think about it. Everything's going to be okay. Because he was that for both of us.
Oh my God. I really don't think there's any other way to do it, because it was just so incredibly helpful to have a third party that wasn't as emotionally invested and as triggered, And so he's able to sit there and see it from a different perspective and allow both of us to calmly speak about and talk about what we truly felt, instead of wanting to burn the whole house to the ground, which I felt like I wanted to do multiple times.
I really thought you were going to throw me down a flight of stairs one time.
I'm sure I thought about it.
No, you did. You
definitely
flinched at me. It was like Connor at like a weigh-in. You gave me like a little, and I was like, oh. That was almost the bottom of the stairs at the end of that, with just your eyes flashing.
Yeah. Sometimes I remember when I used to get really mad, I would pretend that I have lasers coming out of my eyeballs straight into your brain to melt your brain.
But we had help. And we're very fortunate that
Dan
we did.
Saved him from my laser beaming of his face. Thank you, Dan.
No, I got scorched. I got scorched. I think that's also one of the reasons why I think we feel called, even though we're not, experts beyond reproach where we get everything right and we know exactly, like just opening ourselves up to talk to people who are interested in this and interested in understanding their own jealousies and insecurities, because a lot of this translates universally to any type of relationship. It's one of the reasons why I think we've been called, and you specifically have been called, to offer yourself up, through coaching to just talk to people, talk to people who are going through some of these issues that we've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just know how helpful and beneficial it was for me. And so being able to be there for somebody else to answer any questions or be a confidant or just listen or, give any guidance or advice and hopefully be able to smooth out some of the speed bumps that we went through, like, oh, hey, by the way, there is this giant pothole up ahead that you can swerve around if you do this instead of just like blazing through it, So I want to be that person and to help them as much as I possibly can. And like you said, I'm not an expert, and I honestly have trouble calling anybody a relationship expert because you're constantly growing and you're constantly changing and you're constantly learning. So yeah, no, I'm not an expert, but I've put myself into the fire for X amount of years. And there are a lot of like beautiful gyms and beautiful practices and ways that I feel like I can help people. And that's what fulfills me. Like being able to inspire and being able to give love and be able to help people is what I'm here to do. And so that's why I've been opening up the whole coaching to couples and people just in general.
Yeah. And I think we've seen through as well, and some of it's actually been it's been interesting for me because even though we had Dan, our particular dynamic and our type of relationship is unique, as all relationships are, and our peer group and just who we are as people and our social dynamic and being in the public eye and all the things that are unique about it, but really just our age and what we do in our life. I mean, Dr. Dan's just a very different person in a very different scenario, surrounded by very different cultural mores and things like that. So we've been forging a lot of this ground, and we've seen now some of our close friends in our peer group start to go through it, and they're going and they're hitting the major, like deep pain and shit and suffering, but they're also progressing really fast in a lot of ways. And I think part of it's like, God damn, it took us 3 years to get where you went in 3 weeks. Like I see it's been bumpy. Like I acknowledge that. But I think when you have social proof, you have proof that from others who've done it, and you have their ear and their counsel and their like wisdom, like, hey, no, it's okay. Like what you're feeling is normal. Oh yeah, that I think I'm going to die. I don't think I'm going to make it. I think, I need to crawl into an Alice in Wonderland size door that's so small that no one will ever find me again and never come out. I know that feeling. And like, here's some tools and things to kind of work with. And just being able to watch those people around us. Yeah, they're still in the shit. They're still having to do the work, but having some, friends and guidance and knowledge and the experience that we've had has definitely helped accelerate a lot of that.
Sure, absolutely. I would completely agree with that. And I think, one thing that I've noticed through opening up the coaching and all of the messages and everything that I get, people are saying that they want to do this and they want to open up. But one thing is that they feel so alone, that they feel like they go into a room and all of their closest friends and family don't know them and they don't feel comfortable talking to them. And it's like, that is so sad for me to hear. People look at you like you're different because they just don't understand. And this is the opportunity to be like, no. I got you and I feel you and I completely understand where you're coming from. And I know that feeling of walking into a room and feeling alone. And I know those feelings. So like, let me help you because it'll smooth out the process.
And it's not only the feeling in the relationship, but as you mentioned, like, I had to talk to your dad about open relationship and explain that to him, on the phone. Like, so what the hell is all this thing? Your dad is Southern banker, I'm
his only child.
Yeah.
His only daughter. And I grew up with him too. So it's like massively
super skeptical of my psychedelic drug use, already super skeptical of my non-Southern roots or whatever else that might have been there. And
Cali boy.
And I'm in an open relationship with his daughter, and so having to like pay, go through that explanation and then really see those moments where when you're not trying to pitch something, when you're just saying, look, yeah, no, I get it. It's challenging, but these are the things that it's brought us. And this is the love that we have. And these are the things that it avoids, the adultery and the lying and the not being honest and the not really feeling like you're with your best friend because you're holding things from them. And, these are all the things that we can get from that. And the tumultuousness of together and apart and marriage and divorce and marriage and divorce and marriage and divorce and marriage and divorce, which all of our parents have experienced so many times, trying to make these promises that ultimately were not able to be kept, perhaps because there was fundamental issues with the human biology that were not being addressed, and communication issues and whatever reasons, who knows, right? But we were able to have those conversations and do it not in a emotionally biased way, but in a way like, look, yeah, I'm not saying this is for sure, like we know for sure, but this is what we're trying and this is what we're seeing. And I think that helps kind of soften the message for everybody, because nobody wants to be around a zealot. It's like, yeah, this is the only way, your way sucks. Like, nobody wants to be around that, but just opening up and being like, all right, here's what we're learning. Here's the benefit. Here's what we've seen. Here's where the pain is, and just fucking be honest.
And I think just in any relationship, regardless, monogamous, non-monogamous, poly, open, whatever you want to call it, whatever label you put on it, is just realizing that you want, like, the agreements are malleable, right? So like you're going to grow and your partner's going to grow, hopefully. That's what you want, So allow those agreements to be as malleable as possible, and talk about what you want and talk about your desires, and be okay with them being a little bit more fluid than so like rigid and in this specific box. And I think that's why so many divorces happen and people constantly break up, because we find ourselves in serial monogamous relationships. That's not true monogamy. That's serial monogamy. You're just deciding for a year I'll be monogamous, or 2 years I'll be monogamous, or 5 years. So if you can allow your relationship to be a little bit more malleable and it can change from time to time, I believe that it will last longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that we've seen that in 7 years, we had a 2-year monogamous relationship, and towards the end watched our passion fade, watched resentment grow, watched our connection, kind of diminish. And then in a 5-year non-monogamous polyamorous relationship, yeah, we've had some shit. We've had a lot of pain.
Oh, for sure.
And it's been more tumultuous, perhaps even than our monogamous relationship. But what else have we had? Radiant passion, like incredible sexual connection that's sustained even in the late years, and affinity and enjoyment of each other and love and personal growth. We've also had that too, and that's something that I think in relationship, you can kind of chart a lot of the diminishment of some of these things that make a relationship special in the first place. This idea that, the butterflies go away after the start of the relationship. And in most relationships, maybe they do, but you sent me a photo yesterday that brought all the butterflies to me. I'm just sitting at work and I'm getting it. And this is a girl, I've been with you 7 years. And I see that thing, and it's like a new lover just sent me something, and I'm flooded, like I'm in a butterfly garden in my stomach, and I'm just floating around in the day. Like, that's uncommon, Yeah. And we get those experiences still with each other. And I think it comes from allowing each other to be radically free when we're able to, when we are able to let go of our control and our fear and experience the freedom of being with a free person and knowing that they're with us because of a choice. Mm-hmm. It allows so much to be there.
Yeah. Something really interesting that I was reading about recently is by this doctor, and she's done like a lot of long-term studies on, she's done longitudinal studies on long-term relationships and the female sexual desire pertaining to that. And basically what she's saying is that women have a more challenging time with sexual desire with a long-term partner than men do. And when she interviewed all of these women, she then asked them, like, okay, so what happens? Have you asked your partner about being able to go have sex outside of your relationship? And they're like, oh, no, I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to be with my partner and have sex with my life partner. Like, I just want to be sexually desired, and I want to desire having sex with him all the time. But then they were saying, but if I had the freedom to maybe experience something sexual outside of my life partner, I think the sexual desire would come back like that. So I think it's just a really interesting kind of take on it.
Yeah. We've noticed that it does, and we've noticed in our friends that it does, to the people who've tried it. Like, it it definitely has that as one of the things that you can chart in the plus column, is that ignition of passion. And Chris Ryan has some theories that he talks about in his book, like some elements of different, smells and the different hormones and the different, just smell patterns that people put off, and the instinct to prevent, people from having sex in the same family, right? Like the insect.
Then I was in yoga yesterday, and this dude was a brother of mine. I will tell you that much.
Yeah, the pheromones, right? So the pheromones will actually signal, oh, this is family, because you've been around them so long. So you must be in a familial relationship. And so actually the smell of a person can actually signal that this is incest if you have sex. And that was a theory that's proposed. And obviously I don't know how you totally verify that theory, but it seems to be part of the thing. And then when you break that pattern and you allow yourself to be free and you take some time apart, or, experience another lover, like all of that floods back, and it's like that new relationship starting over again, which is like a wild phenomenon, and not even something that I think we went into it planning for. That's just something like, oh wow, this is cool, because we were thinking about, oh well, we'll get to experience it with other people, but not realizing that what we were really doing is also reigniting the passion of our own relationship.
Yeah, it just brings back the positive into the relationship. It's not always like focused outside on other people. Like, this is to benefit your relationship too, and you to grow as a human. And you can do that together while experiencing other people.
Yep, exactly. So all right, so let's take a look. Let's bring people up to speed here, because we've been learning a lot in the last few months, and people who've been following my newsletter and reading, they've kind of caught up with
your
some
newsletter. My God. Can I just say?
I share everything, right? And I think the newsletter she's referring to is a newsletter where I, opened up about the fact that you're in love with your current lover, and that you have somebody you're in love with. And that's actually really been the thing that has opened up the most growth for me, is because without actually having to be in that state, it was always temporary enough and transient enough that I could get by with enough crutches, enough like a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of validation, a little bit of avoidance, a little bit of all of these things. I could just squeeze by, a little bit of blame, a little bit of like, you did this thing wrong, a little bit of put together this cocktail that would allow the storm to pass. And I was like, whew, out of that storm, good. But this has put me in a position where I actually have to deal with my own fundamental issues, and also any fundamental issues that have existed in the relationship. So, people have heard some of my perspective, and I'll add on that. But in your perspective, what have we learned in the last few months?
Yeah, it's been challenging, obviously. But the fact that really for me, I always wondered if you could love two people at one time, and that's something that people tend to bring up when they discredit open, is that there's no way that you can, a man is not born with two hearts, is what they say, right? There's like some quote out there. But it's like, okay, that's fine. I don't have to, because I'm giving love to somebody else doesn't take away my love from you by any means. And that was something that I kind of learned at the very beginning with that first relationship, where I still wanted to be with you and I was still attracted to him. Now this is on like a deeper level. But it just allows us to fully express and fully love whoever we want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so lesson one, I think there was some doubt that you had for a while about your ability to be able to maintain love with me and maintain love with somebody else. But we actually started to figure out, and through this new relationship actually kind of proved the point that it is possible. But there was some doubts, and we started to track like, okay, what was creating the disturbance? And ultimately what we realized was creating the disturbance was both shame and mistruth. Ultimately, that was like causing a lot, and that's on both sides, like that's mutual. My shame about expressing my feelings, creating an unstable environment, creating fear for you, and then your fear of expressing the truth about how you actually felt and also expressing your truth to them. It created this whole disturbance field, so that it felt like with that disturbance cloud present, it was hard for you to engage with someone and engage with me and still be in love. But really, it wasn't the love that was the problem. It was this disturbance field, this distortion field that was surrounding it.
Right. It just felt like the love was there. It just felt like I was either hurting you or hurting them. So then it was like, well, then I'm just not going to do any of it.
Right.
I'm going to put myself in timeout and no one's going to love me. And I'm not going to love anyone.
Yeah. And that, that's another hard thing to do, because going into open relationship, you're going to do things that are going to put your partner in a lot of pain. But you have to have the long vision, that long game vision where it's like, yeah, all right, I see the pain. And I see that in the pain, they may not, thank me for it at the time. They may blame me for it, and they may chastise me for it, and they may curse me for it. But in the long game, we agreed to this, and pain is going to be an inevitable part of this process. And, it's all we can do is do our best to smooth it out and help facilitate the lessons in coming, but you're going to hurt your partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody wants to do that, but I was just having a conversation today, and I think it's important to touch on when you are in some sort of argument or discussion with your partner, being able to really see the emotions underneath what they're saying. Like, you did this to me, or I didn't feel like special, or I didn't do, they create this whole story when really all it was a mirror. You were a mirror of their insecurities. So all of their insecurities came up. So now they're just pointing it all at you. Mm-hmm. Like, no, you did this, you did this, you did this. I blame you. I have self-worth issues, so I'm not good enough, blah, blah, blah. Like, but they're saying that in such like an egotistical, like they're building this with the mind and not really getting to the core foundational issues. So if you can have that conversation with your partner as calmly as possible, or mediated, or whatever it is, really being able to see the emotions underneath it and where that comes from, and not just solely the insecurities that are like screaming and yelling at you.
That's huge. And that's a huge skill. And it's something that we're still even learning. And I think one of the things that prevented us from like really reaching a fully stable ground is my shame surrounding the fact that I'm still jealous. I had shame because I'm the one promoting this open relationship. I was the one who was callously telling you like, hey, you agree to this. Why are you still fucked up? You know what I mean? I was the one who wasn't as compassionate as I should have been, who was promoting this, type of relationship for us at the start. And like, I'm the one who's the conscious guy, quote mark, conscious guy who's supposed to have this shit figured out. And I'm still jealous, but I was ashamed of that. And so I wouldn't express it as that. I was always calling out other reasons and calling out other things that were the cause of it, and externalizing these internal feelings, and then creating scenarios where I could get validation or get something from you that would cure the pain, and not just being like, man, I'm like jealous. I'm really jealous right now. And even look, like last night, little light bulb revelation, like you're about to go see your lover tomorrow.
Ricky, you can say his name.
Yeah, we can say his name.
We can say his name.
Okay, so you're about to go see Ricky. You're about to go see Ricky tomorrow. And, I was feeling like, everything's good. We have a really good framework. And I want to talk about the framework that we set and some of the lessons in that. But we have a good framework. We've really connected well. We're in a good place. But what I was wanting was some verbal affirmation about your love and your excitement about where we were and whatever. So I kept asking you questions, and you're like, yeah, we're good. I'm good. I feel good. Like, okay, but how do you feel about this? And I kept asking you the same question.
And I kept saying like, I actually feel really great about everything. Like everything's going really well. I'm happy. Everything's great. And then he would come up with another question. I'm like, I'm great. Like, I'm good. I'm really not lying. Like,
yeah.
I'm very happy right now, actually.
And I realized eventually, I'm like, this is not working. Like I have an itch. I'm trying to get it scratched, but I'm not just saying like, hey, I have this itch. And then finally, like ding dong in the kitchen, I'm like, all right, look, communication I'm not communicating my desire well at this point. I was like, what I really need is verbal affirmation, and you were pointing to all the wonderful things that you'd been doing for me that day, and all the parts of our agreement that were solid. And there's so many good things. And like I said, that, photo that lit me up with butterflies, all kinds of great things. But what I was asking for was like, okay, yeah, but I'm still having some jealousy, and I really just want some verbal affirmation about how you feel and how excited you are. But instead of doing that, I just kept asking pestering questions. And now, so one night ago, we learned a lesson. And the lesson is when I'm feeling that and wanting verbal affirmation, I just say, hey, like I'd like a little verbal affirmation or a little affirmation about how you feel and what's going on. And then that'll allow you compassionately, to say, oh, I see where you're at and I've felt those feelings before. And here, so let me talk about us and talk about how excited I am about us and like really expand upon this topic.
Yeah. And I think that's important for all relationships is to really express like what you're feeling. And that's okay to do that. And it saves you however long of trying to figure out what's actually going on. Like if you just, hey, I really want some extra love today.
But even that can be too generic.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it's a good start. It's a good start for sure. But like you were showing me lots of love. Like you were showing me lots of love on a lot of different love languages. And I haven't read that book and I don't know too deep about it, but I know that verbal affirmations is one of those. And you were hitting like all of the marks on most of the things except for just the verbal discussion about it. And I have a very cerebral mind. I love words. I'm obsessed with words. I'm addicted to words. If I'm addicted to anything, it's addicted to words, right? So that monkey part of my brain that's addicted to word I need words. Feed me words, Whitney. Feed me words.
So then it's like trying to make somebody dinner and they're like, oh, I don't care, whatever, when they really want spaghetti. Like,
don't fucking say spaghetti again. You trying to trigger me?
Ooh, the wounds are back. But it really is. Like if you want spaghetti for dinner, fine. If you want steak. No. If you want spaghetti for dinner, just say that you want spaghetti. Like don't be, well, I don't know. Maybe, do you want maybe something with garlic in it? Or do you like basil? Or how about, do you like noodles?
Or like describing the macros. Like I'd like a, 22 gram protein, 10 gram fat, 5 gram carb meal.
Wow, I would get nowhere with that.
Right? Like sometimes, and you can describe like, I want love. Like, yeah, I want
in that
protein.
case, I'd be like, can I have 100% carbs, please? Whatever that is, I will eat that.
And I think for me, there was shame around that. And also this like shame around needing something. So I would trick myself by asking these questions. Well, I'm just asking questions when really I was like, oh man, like I really feel like I want some verbal affirmation and like, or I want something else. And I think that's been a big humbling step for me to take, is just acknowledging when I'm feeling jealous and acknowledging when I want some kind of exchange, and some exchange that's just honest, that can help me feel better about the situation. But first, before we got to all that, we had to realize that even though we talked a bunch of shit about being in truth, like first step is you got to be in real truth, like really trust that you can express yourself fully to your partner, and how like you can be close, you can be in a permission game, but it's not in a truth game, and I think that was the big step that we took 2 months ago that kind of kicked this thing off.
Yeah, it was just fully being 100% honest with each other and how we felt.
Yeah, that was absolutely the key. And then there was, kind of a period where we were trying to figure out, okay, what agreements do we have? What, and what expectations can we put? And I think for me, I had always had this idea that you could put agreements on the wild part of love, which is just the thing that's there. It's like the unquantifiable, uncontainable, wild element of love. And I've often said that love and God and that's all synonymous. And it'd be like trying to put God in a jar and measure it. Well, God's the jar and the scale and all the things that you can't measure it. And so you can't put an agreement on the love that you feel with another person, or try to compare or measure that love in a certain way and make that thing, have a rule around it. Like you can't do that.
What I keep going back to is like, and I think this is a good thing for a lot of people to kind of keep in mind, is that if you are in an open relationship, like your love with somebody is going to be special because it's with that specific person, Like, of course, ours is special because we've been together for so long. We've been through so much, and there's like a perfect recipe for this beautiful love that we have. And then the love that I have with Ricky is special as well. It's different for sure, but it's special because it's with that specific individual. That's just how it is, period. It's just a special relationship. Doesn't mean it's better. Doesn't mean it's worse. Doesn't mean it's whatever. It's just like that's a beautiful, special relationship that you can have. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I was the first to cross that bridge and let you know that I loved Savannah, who's the girl that I've been seeing for 2 years. And understanding, you were the first to have to kind of receive, and you did so incredibly gracefully. And I think partly probably because you've been having to do the work more consistently for longer, and maybe just because it's your natural inclinations or what all the potential reasons, but
it's for sure not my natural inclination. Do you not remember me telling you how jealous I was?
But
I remember like having a challenge with it, being like, whoa, wait, so you love somebody else? Wait, you're in love with somebody else. So what does that even mean? How are you in love with somebody else? Like it was still a thing that we had to go through and discuss that I never really fully understood until I fell in love with somebody else. But of course it makes sense. I mean, you have been with her for 2 years at this point. It would, I feel like, be kind of odd to not be in love.
Right. But there was, even that expression like that came late, like the love came first, and my communication of that came months later, when we were in ceremony together and unpacking some of these deepest truths in a very safe environment, let's just call it that. And then it was still, a bit of a challenge to kind of grapple, because it's testing this idea that love is in scarcity, that it's finite. And the analogy I always use is like, no one goes to a mother who has their second kid and says, oh, how does it feel to love your first kid half as much? Like, we know that love isn't divided like that. But in romantic love, we've been told a different story. Like, here's again, a man doesn't have two hearts. I give you my heart. Well, you can't give your heart. Your heart is love. It's everything, and it's universal, and it's unfatigable, and it's, universal. The only thing you can give is time, actually. But love is infinite. And I think it tests that theory, and it tests that in a very core way, because it's rewriting and reevaluating the fundamental belief surrounding love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think obviously you have your love. So when you have your love, that's the relationship. And I kind of want to get into the whole like relationship and agreement difference, because I think they're separate, but they're definitely related. So you have the relationship there with the love. And then that's when you can start to build your agreements on top of that. What does that look like in this physical place?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, all right. So going back to this line of understanding, like at first I was like, oh, no, we just get rid of all expectations and all agreements. Well, that didn't work, because that wasn't quite right. What we needed was to make agreements that didn't have to do with the love and didn't have to do with the relationship, but had to do with time, had to do with commitment, had to do with mutual investment into the partnership, into the team that we were forming as a unit. And that investment is something that you can make agreements on. And that agreements do include time, and does include planning, does include mutual effort and work, and the combined, conscious, compassionate effort towards the common goal. And that's where the field of agreements, I think, is supposed to live and is necessary to live. And so finally, after all of this, trial and error, we've reached a place where we're like, okay, we can allow love to be wild. We know that love isn't finite. We know that we can split it and it doesn't split. But what we do have to have agreements on is like, what are we mutually putting into our relationship? And I think we've gotten to a place where, okay, we got that. And then we got the understandings about expressing our truth and expressing how we're feeling. And even again, like I said, learning last night, like expressing the specifics of, oh, I would like some verbal affirmations at this point, down to the nitty gritty of what it is that we might want or need, and feeling comfortable to both give and receive that.
Whoa. That was a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And look, this is still...
Get your popcorn.
This is still a work in progress as it is. And, I know we've been through a lot, and I think part of the reason why we are, so grateful for having done that is we know that all of these lessons, however hard they may have been, can be something that can help people out of a tough spot. And we've both been able to do that in a lot of different ways. Like what we're learning is not just learning for us, it's learning for our friends and it's learning for people in general. You know,
for the
in a greater
world,
sense.
really, just to create and spread the message of love.
Yep.
And what like capital L real love is.
Yeah.
Unconditional love.
Whoa. Feels good. Well, let's go to some FAQs, things that people constantly ask us about open relationship, since we're on the topic, and go there. And I think one of the big ones is, what do you do when you have kids?
Right.
Like that's one that kind of comes up like immediately. And obviously we don't have kids, so we don't have a lot of personal experience, but we have some ideas and some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like he said, we don't have kids. And that is something that comes up and they say, oh, this is all fine and good, just wait to have kids. Yeah, I bet it adds a bit more of a challenge to it. But there have been studies on this by Dr. Elizabeth Sheff. And it's really interesting to me because one of the things that they reported, these are kids that grew up in polyamorous communities, not ones to where their families decided to be poly in their adolescent years. This is them growing up in these communities. And what they said is that the kids reported having multiple trusting adults that they could go to and they could confide in. They also thought it was great that they had another ride home from school and they could get another $5 of lunch money type of deal. And the one thing that they didn't really like, which I thought was cute, was because of the increased supervision, they can't get away with as much stuff. So forget about sneaking out and things like that. I mean, if I had multiple, 2 dads or 2 moms or however many in one community, I would never be able to sneak out of the house, and I definitely did that when I was younger. But, and what she also shows through all of this is she does a study. It was a 20-year study based on their age brackets. So 0 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 to 17, and so on. And basically throughout, the kids don't really show a whole lot of interest in what their family's private life is. So if you're young, they go over to their friend's house. This is the younger ones, around 0 to 8 years old. And the girl comes home and she goes, oh, Tasha has a second mommy. And that's it. And then she goes back to playing with her Legos. She doesn't comprehend really what's going on.
Because she doesn't have all those societal norms built in and hammered into her head and all the fairy tale stories that are being chosen and having the one and he gives you his heart and it's blah, blah, blah. And all of these ideas that we have, it actually just allows the human to learn and see love around them.
Right. And that's how it progressed throughout the study, was that, a little bit older, obviously they could pick up on things were a little bit different, but yet they still didn't really want all of that much. They didn't really care what their parents were doing, or they were just kind of self-absorbed in their own world. I mean, think about when we were teenagers. You didn't really talk to your parents about their dating life, and then when it got up to 18 to 25, that's the point to where obviously you can make your own decisions and figure things out. So what it showed was basically that these children would go off, and young adults at this point would go off, and they didn't have as much, what's the word I'm looking for? They didn't put a whole lot of emphasis on labels, that they were in a place where they could consciously decide oh, I can see that relationships are different. So maybe I'm going to do this or maybe I'm going to do that. But then the other interesting thing about that is that because of how they grew up, they practiced the communication and negotiation skills all of the time, and they witnessed it through their family. So it actually helped them in college with their roommates and with future relationships, because they knew how to communicate in an open and honest and calm way.
Yeah, rather than just armoring, holding resentment, having fights, not talking, not expressing love. Your kids are very perceptive. They'll learn the things. And if you can show them love and communication and the openness of it, and even if they do get to see conflict resolution, all those skills they'll learn. They'll learn from you in that way. And look, my parents split up when I was 2, and I had, stepdad and dad, stepmom and mom. And I've known all from way early. When people would ask, oh, that must have been really hard, your parents split when you were 2. I was like, nah, it was awesome. It was because I got to learn amazing things from 2 amazing people that were also dad and also mom that I never would have gotten to learn. I never would have gotten to pattern off of their wisdom and off of their relationships and the things that I would get to see. So it's not as clear cut a thing as people think, like, oh, well, when you have kids, no way you can do that because the only way to raise kids is in a nuclear family. Well, except for the most and majority of the 100,000 years of humans raising kids beforehand, which was in a much more tribal setting. Where
even now,
wasn't
look at the
guaranteed.
divorce rate. How many people are really growing up in a nuclear family?
Right. I mean, I didn't.
Exactly. I didn't either. Did
Yeah.
anyone here? Nope.
No. I mean, so this paradigm has been, it really is just an idea now. And people are like reinforcing and supporting this idea, but studies and research and when you actually practically look at it, it's like saying, there was an idea that all drugs are bad and psychedelics are drugs and they're bad for you. Oh, well, now we start having clinical studies on psilocybin treating depression and MDMA treating, PTSD and all of these things coming out. And all of a sudden these drugs that are bad, that fry your brain, are now being fast tracked by the FDA because of the incredible efficacy they've shown in placebo controlled studies. And so paradigms can shift, like ideas can shift. And we've seen those ideas shift about sexuality. Like the difference in the younger generation, when they talk about the fluidity of bisexuality, it's way different than when I grew up, when like gay was a slur and was the thing to be feared for the most part.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh yeah, you're gay or you're trying gay or whatever. Like, cool. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, what are we having for lunch?
Right.
Like, it's like a different environment that's created a whole different set of a different paradigm, a different codification. And I think that's kind of the future that I think both of us see, where, yeah, sure, there will be awesome nuclear families where it's just a nuclear family and they're fucking crushing it and it's awesome. And that's always going to exist and always going to have the opportunity to be beautiful, but there's also a lot of other beautiful expressions and a lot of other beautiful ways that this can go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not one is not more beautiful than the other. And that's what I've, through going through some Instagram comments and whatever else, it's a lot of the time people are saying like, well, there is more joy. There is more happiness. There is more trust. There is more commitment. There is more in a monogamous relationship. And I cannot more heavily disagree with you.
Yeah.
Because I've been in it, and your monogamous relationship might be absolutely incredible, and I support and give all the love to that. But I am also incredibly happy and fulfilled, and I've seen other relationships that are absolutely beautiful that are not monogamous. So one is not more beautiful than the other. I don't think open is more beautiful than poly, or poly is more beautiful than monogamous at all.
They all can be the best thing for you.
Right.
And that's, I think
that's what it's all about. Like, just be able to create this beautiful love nugget, whatever it is, and just eat that nugget all the time.
Maybe a 1-piece Chick-fil-A or maybe a 20-piece.
Yeah.
That thing. And I think that's also something that we're building into too, is like understanding. We've reevaluated the traditional relationship structure and learned a ton from that. And I think both of us have interest in like, okay, what is the best container? What is the best situation that we could potentially raise a kid in? And I think we're still exploring that and still building that, but we're already starting to see the aunties and uncles, even people we're not sexual with, but like the aunties and uncles that would form this tribe. You know what I mean? That like Uncle Kyle, if I have a child, which is definitely still a very high possibility, Uncle Kyle's going to play a big role
for sure
in that kid. It's not like you're sexual partners with Kyle, but it's just our understanding of tribe and family and how creating that family, it isn't just determined by your, the happenstance of your bloodline and your genetics. You can actually build your own family and build your own aunties and uncles. And people, we do that with godparents kind of, and it always exists where there's special people, friends of the family, but you can actually consciously do that and build this container that would allow a young future, fully flowered human to bud and seed and sprout and eventually grow and flower into.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. So with that being said, like if people are considering, open, you know what I mean? If that's like something that they're considering, what do you think what is your advice for someone who's considering it, and when is the time where you'd say like, nah, probably shouldn't? And when is the time where you say, okay, you probably should? And what do you say to people who are like, how do you initiate and kind of make the first steps?
Well, initiation in the first steps, I think, is, reading books like we did. I would say read The Mastery of Love, read Sex at Dawn, read Untrue for sure. And just be able to get to a place to where you can have these conversations, because it's going to be important for you to see it on an intellectual and philosophical level, then put it into practice right out of the gates.
Yeah.
So that's step one, is just being able to have the conversation with your partner and be open about it and not be afraid of it. And then if you guys do decide to take the next step, call me and we'll talk about it to make sure you really want to. No, I think it's pacing is really important, talking about agreement. So pacing, not just going like, for lack of a better term, balls deep right out of the gate. You know what I mean? Like maybe she goes to lunch first, or maybe he goes to lunch first, or maybe you all go to lunch first, or, like it doesn't have to be this huge thing. You can take small baby steps towards your ultimate goal, because it is the long game.
Yeah, I think that's important. And there's also it also is a point too where there's so much anticipation and so much imagination that it almost feels like there's some point where you got to just kind of leap in and then know that the first 20 seconds in that cold is going to be a lot of heavy breathing and a lot of like, do you feel like that's like always an inevitability, or is there the let's go in one toe at a time genuine approach, or is there always going to be a point where you guys are going to have to look at each other and say, I fucking love you so much, like this is going to be cold, we're going to have some shit, let's hold hands.
Yeah, no, that's for sure there. 1000%. But you can make the pool a little bit deeper or shallow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're jumping in together. You guys want to do this for each other. You want to learn about yourselves. You want to grow the relationship. That's like your main goal. But it at some point it's going to hurt. So just being able to say, like you said, look each other in the eye and say, okay, let's go. Like you're your first step here. Yeah. I have the lessons that are going to come up for me are going to be invaluable and things that I would have never learned otherwise, and vice versa. And the point will come to where they will have to go through the same thing too.
Yeah. I think for me, the people who I say don't do it for are the people who just want it for the sex.
Don't do it just for the sex. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
Watch some porn, get like a blow up doll. I don't know, but it's not worth it just for the sex, because it brings up a lot of emotions. Like you have to go into it wanting to know more about yourself and it's an agreement to expanding your own consciousness, an agreement to expanding your relationship. If it's not that, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that completely, because there's a lot of men who, are unfaithful, and a lot of men who crave that sexual variety, but, and so they think, at first blush, they hear I'm in an open relationship or see me with, a girl that I'm seeing or Savannah or somebody, and they're like, oh man, that seems like heaven. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. Now let's chill and let me talk to you about how you are going to feel when your love, when your wifey, when your girl is fucking somebody else. How do you feel about that? And initially that reaction is, oh, fuck that. I'm like, okay. So if you don't want to learn how to transcend those feelings, like don't do this, man. Like use monogamy as your lesson and figure out another way, because the only reason you should do this is because you want to transcend your own failings of your ego, your own jealousy, your own shit. You got to want to confront the darkness. You got to want to go to the inmost cave.
And also just realizing that because we're human and because the society that we've grown up in and the influences in our lives, that we've been programmed to believe certain ways. If we would have grown up with different family, with different parents in a different time, in a different community, we would not have the same beliefs. So that was something that was interesting to me. It was like, okay, so if I grew up elsewhere, I wouldn't be thinking how I thought right now. Okay, so let me figure out what I actually think and what I like and don't like and desire and don't desire.
Yeah. You can actually look at studies that show what is the number one determining factor on the religion of a person. The religion of their parents. That's it. Like that's the number one determining factor. It's like, what environment did they grow up in? What was the dominant social norm? And that will determine what someone, and that's a very important thing. Someone's religion is a very important thing. Someone's relationship is a very important thing, but it's fluid depending upon what the norm is around them. And then there's those pioneers, and then there's those other people who are like, this doesn't fit. I can't wear this. Like I moved to Texas, which is very, traditionally Christian dominated as a religion. And I would get invited to, Bible studies and ski camps that I thought were ski trips, but were really Bible camps. And I'd be like, whoa, this doesn't fit right. Like I can't wear this shirt, so it doesn't work. But I also grew up in an environment where I already knew that. But if I'd have grown up here, maybe I would have been in a different environment where it would have felt like it fit right until I started asking questions and things didn't quite work. And the paradigms of fear and judgment that were, put onto a higher power, this constant, someone's looking over my shoulder and judging me, didn't really feel right and didn't feel good. So I think, recognizing how much and how dependent it is upon just the programming that we have as an organism. Yeah. Well, any other, one other thing I want to talk is like another like side effect kind of benefit. And I think you've gotten to really experience this, as I said, because, you haven't had as many consistent, long-term lovers as I have, but like looking at the benefit of how it's brought you closer to some of the people that I've been with and just girls in general.
Yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, I was always very competitive with other women, as I feel like that's a common thing that you hear, unfortunately, but it is. I was very competitive, and I had mainly guy friends, and great guy friends, but it was because I didn't really like girls, and I was competitive with them. Let's be real, because they were trying to take my boyfriend, or maybe they looked better than me, or they had a better shirt, or whatever it was. I don't know, whatever I was trying to come up with in my own stupid head. But what I found the most interesting thing is through Open, I've become extremely close with girls. Just like I have a tribe of girlfriends that are just beautiful. Like the bonds that I have with them is unlike anything else. And I'm not sexual with them. People probably think I have a whole bunch of girlfriends. I'm not sexual with them. So like to me, it's like we just have like a beautiful, deep friendship that it's created because one, I've dealt with all of my stuff. Let's be real, not all my stuff, but I've dealt with a lot of my stuff and I will continue to do that. And so it's allowed me to open myself up to women and see them as equals and peers and how they can inspire me and how I can inspire them. And it creates these beautiful bonds that I feel like are unfortunately hard to come by these days because we're taught to be competitive with them. So through Open, having my fiance be able to have sex with another woman, it's like, oh, well, that already takes away the main reason why I would probably not be friends with them and be competitive already, because I'm allowing that. And it's going to bring up a whole lot of emotions. But through this, like we were talking about, the first lover that you had who's sitting in this room now is my best friend. And people think like, how is that even possible? You can't, like, what are you talking about? You all hang out? Yeah, we all hang out. And she's like literally my best friend. And this is like not a facade, just straight up. And it's like, it's just so cool to be able to have that. And otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to release whatever was holding me back from connecting with women. And it was just really interesting to watch that kind of unfold through being in an open relationship when you think it would cause more competitiveness, and it does the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I've absolutely noticed that too. And all of you're hard pressed to find a more competitive dude than me. I mean, I've been competing in everything, and I always had this belief, like I only accepted that somebody could be better than me at one thing and never two things. You know what I mean? Like these like crazy things I would tell myself, and there's just rapid desire to optimize and perfect my skills in all of these different areas. And I remember, through all the lovers that you've had, me consciously having to release some of these, what I thought were the necessities that made me who I was and made me worthy of love and made me of value and made me who I am. Like the very first guy you started seeing happened to be the one guy at the gym at the time. There's tons of people now. We just had Hapthor in, which is like twice the size of a human, the world's strongest man. That was not in the early days of the Onnit Gym. In the early days of the Onnit Gym, there was one dude who could throw a ball over his head farther than me. And that was your first dude. That was your first dude. Look at that little laugh.
Second.
And so this idea of my physical performance, being the thing that was the most, like I had to start letting that go right away. And then started dating fighters. And I was like, well, fuck, they could kick my ass. And my first instinct with the guy with the ball throwing was throw more balls, get better. I can beat his score. I could never beat his score. He was just better than me. He was stronger than me. He had better leverage. He was taller. He was going to always win that. So I had like kind of let that go. And then with the fighters, like, oh yeah, they're always going to be able to kick my ass. Like no matter what I do, it doesn't matter how many days I hit the pads, like they're always going to kick my ass. And like in every different way, there's going to be something about somebody that I have to let go and then celebrate that you get to actually have that experience with them. And people always think like, oh, he's just in it because it's the fetish. He just enjoys thinking about people, fucking his girl. No, I wish. That would be dope, because then I could really get some pleasure out of this thing. I don't have that fantasy thing. Like it isn't for me. It's painful for me, actually, to be honest. And not that it doesn't reignite some chemistry when we're back together, like we talked about. And there are some elements of you being free that are attractive and whatever, but this is not a fantasy for me. This is not a fetish. This is not something I enjoy, but I can learn to release the necessity of those things about myself and celebrate that you get to have those fringe experiences. You get to be with somebody who, yeah, maybe they are a world-class athlete in one specific way, and I'll never be that, but you get to experience that. Dope. Like, good for you. If I love you and I'm your close friend and I'm someone who really is your best teammate, I should be happy you get to experience that fringe and aren't having to go through the whole rest of the gamut that very specialized person might have to offer. You can just have to experience, okay, a night out with a total, savage world-class athlete, beyond. And great, get to celebrate that, and you get to celebrate the same thing. For me, like unique experiences that I normally wouldn't get. And we get to try our best, to celebrate that with each other.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been a lot.
This has been a lot, but I think really, we covered so much. This is a conversation also that could go on for like 17 days straight and you would never run out of something. Like there would always be some sort of question. There would always be some sort of topic. We'd only be like scratching the surface,
Yeah.
So
no doubt.
It's great that we were able to, hop on here and cover so much ground. And I hope that it was, lend some support and some guidance to people out there who are interested in this kind of experiment.
No doubt. And if people want more, again, at Wit and Love.
Wit in Love. I changed my name.
Yeah, boom.
Wit, WHIT, and then NLOVE. Wit in Love on Instagram. And send me your questions or anything. I'm pretty responsive on there. And then also I have my link for couples and one-on-one coaching. And we have all kind of different coaching packages, but that can be at any point in your relationship. If you just got out of a relationship, or if you're looking to go to open, or you guys want a mediated conversation, or you have your other lovers on there, bring them all. Let's have a party. Let's figure this out.
Yeah. And you can look at it too as just talking to someone with real, genuine experience in the fight. Like you could go to the martial arts coach who's never been to battle and never actually fought, or you could talk to the fighter. And, we're in the category where it's like, here's an opportunity to talk to someone who's been in the fray.
Right.
And had to deal with all of those elements. And I think that's a cool opportunity. And for me, we're also offering, there's weekends where we get together and talk to people. And then there's the mastermind, the Fit for Service mastermind that you're going to be involved in. So people are looking to take it further and like have that, the mutuality of both of us being able to offer that. Definitely check that out, or just, follow the newsletter. And anytime I stumble and anytime I come up with a face full of mud and shit, like we're going to hear about it.
You're going to hear about it.
That's my commitment.
I'll tell you hear about it.
That's my commitment.
About when I hear about it. I get like 24 hours on y'all. So
because that's the thing that alchemizes it for me, that alchemizes my own pain and says like, look, I'm going to just share. I'm going to share the things that have worked and share the things that have failed. And hopefully that, makes any sacrifice that I make or any pain that I feel, it instantly alchemizes that to an act of service. And it keeps me going.
Exactly. We all go through the hard stuff and the challenges, and we're just here to support each other as best as we can.
Well, Whit, thank you for being my teacher, my lover, my best friend, my ally through all of this. I love you. And there couldn't have been another person who would have brought me this much learning and brought me this much love. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for putting up with all my lessons and insecurities and the things that I've had to learn and be there and continually say yes to this process. And so thank you, love. And thank you to my other loves and the other people who have been a part of this journey. And thank you to your loves and your lovers who have all taught us things and taught me things, and just nothing but gratitude for you and the whole process.
Yeah. Love you.
Love you too. Love you guys too. Bye, everybody. 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 Everybody.